minimum wages. I think last time we were discussing pension and how pension came into being. And as I mentioned during that time, these forms of social security are available to those people that are in employment. And we covered how employees are covered by the pension scheme and what benefits it brings to them when they retire. But another form of social security to someone who is employed is the minimum wages. But when we are looking at minimum wages, we will look beyond the minimum wages because we are assuming that the person is in employment. And in that employment, there must be security of the employment and then the amount of money that the person gets at the end of the task. Just to highlight some of the issues that you could have covered under employment law elsewhere, we may mention that employment, as far as the Employment Act of Malawi is concerned, Employment Act, you can be employed over an unspecified period. And normally this is called, in the everyday language, we call this permanent employment. But you can also be employed for a specified period. In everyday language, we call this contract employment. Although this is also a contract employment because it's a contract, it's an agreement. But we normally call this specified period. You can agree that you are going to work for me for 1 month. You can agree 3 months. You can agree 3 years. You can agree 5 years. As long as the period of employment is specified, then we call that contract employment or contract for specified period. But if it's employment as part of regular employees, which we normally call permanent employment, it's for unspecified period. And the third one is for a task. A task can be, let's say you ask someone to dig a rubbish pit. When he finishes digging the rubbish pit, that's the end of the contract because it's for a specified task. You mop this room. At the end of mopping this room, the contract has come to an end. The same can be, I want you to prepare my financial statements for this year. So the task will be preparation of those financial statements. When you finish that, it's the end of the contract. But sometimes task-based employment can easily be confused with a contractor who is hired to do an assignment. For example, if you call an electrician to fix an electrical fault in your house, that's not a task-based employment, because that one is an independent contractor. He always does that. He's going to do it for you. He's going to do it for other people. So that's not employment as specified in this act. I needed to explain these things before I talk about the minimum wage. In all contracts, any contract has got an offer and then acceptance. The same with employment. So you are offered a job and then you accept. In most instances, we can say if I'm offered a job of a security guard for a house, that means that person made an offer which highlighted the work that I was being employed for and the wages that I would be paid. And in my acceptance, I'm satisfied that I can do the work and I'm happy with the wages. So why should we have a minimum wage if any job requires that I am offered and I accept? If I'm not happy with the offer, I should decline. But then the government or the Minister of Labor decides to impose a minimum wage. Why? Why should the Ministry of Labor impose a minimum wage when it's possible for someone to be given an assignment and he accepts or refuses?
The minimum wage like a pay.
Okay, let me explain the concept of a minimum wage. The concept of a minimum wage is where government, and I think I have highlighted where the minister will come up with a wage bracket to say this class of people, because it depends also on the class of people, can only be given this minimum salary. You can't give them anything below this. You can give them anything above, but nothing below a certain minimum amount. Why should that be imposed?
According to the way it is, and they also welcome the need of that someone that wage specifically. It will cover or if you give someone a list for a 40,000, that one you can only cover him at least for the minimum wage is 90,000. Yeah, at least say 90,000 at least.
Yeah, but I'm saying when the employer has a job, let's say I want a guard, for example. As an example, I want a guard. When I approach people to take up the job of a guard, I will make the offer of, I want a guard. Secondly, I will say how much I'm willing to pay a guard. So if the person is happy with the work and the amount of money, why not just leave it like that? Why should we impose a minimum wage? Because if he's not happy, he thinks 40 is too little, then he should just decline to take up the job. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Why should it take government to impose a certain minimum? On this one, I'm just interested in the classification. If you look at the classification, you see that, okay, in the past, they used to give a different minimum wage for those who are in the urban setting. Versus rural setting. But this classification was more or less removed, although they still set the wages. What I'm saying, it's removed because now the amount that is set as a minimum wage for an employee in the urban setting is the same as the one for rural setting. So in other words, the distinction between a rural and an urban employee is no longer there. I think there are reasons why. Then the next classification is domestic worker. And the third classification is for truck drivers. Why should truck drivers have a specified minimum wage? Why not just use the same urban rural setting classification? I mean, why should a truck driver be looked at differently from any other worker?
Just to go on a kind of view that someone is doing, they go, for example, an employee, a manager, the manager, they will see the amount of money.
Okay, let me ask this way. If a truck driver's minimum wage is 234,000, why can't the minimum wage be the same for those employees that are just being described as rural or urban? Why can't they use the same amount per month as a minimum wage for everyone? What is it? What's so special being truck driver and then they should prescribe a wage, a specific wage for a truck driver? And why classify a truck driver who is driving locally and that one who is driving, going to South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, DRC, Zambia as different. Why differentiate? Sometimes the reasoning for minimum wage is neither here or there, because I would still say, I would still argue that why differentiate a domestic worker and employees in the urban or rural setting? I mean, okay, is a guard a domestic worker, or if he's working at my house, is he becoming a domestic worker, or a domestic worker is more or less a garden boy? Or what's the difference between a garden boy and a maid in the house and the guard? Why should they have different minimum wages? What is the reasoning behind setting different minimum wages?
I think the kind of view that someone
I think substantially we can say there are no technical reasons of describing one person as a domestic worker and another and someone who is not a domestic worker, unless the comparison is for people that are working for companies those working for companies or those working for individuals. So, if that was the distinction, then it doesn't matter whether it's a truck driver driving on international duty, but if he's working for an individual, there can be a minimum wage based on that fact. And then if he is working for a company, then it has to be different. But if you just look at the kind of classifications, it's working, but it doesn't have any technical reasoning as to why a domestic worker should not be getting a minimum wage of 234,500.
They're also waiting for someone. Like this one, the low one. They're also waiting for someone. The low one, they're also waiting for someone.
I'm the one who's asking. You should be the one answering me. We should. And why should driving less than 30 tons only allow you to get 100,000? And yet, if you are driving 30 tons, a Tiva, which is 40 or 45 tons, you should, just because both of you you are at a rank in Ntandile. This one is driving a Tiva 45 tons, and this one is driving a lorry 15 tons, and this one should be getting as a minimum wage 100, 500, and this one should be getting 167, 500. Why? All of them are sweating themselves out on the Ntandile, and sometimes maybe this guy is the one who is getting more trips with his 15 tonner than, so making more money than the one driving a 45-ton tipper. So, but why should the minimum wage be different? And if the minimum wage is basically just trying to make a person survive, would a domestic worker survive with 52, while this one we are saying he should survive with 100? What makes the domestic worker be able to survive with 52,000 when we are saying the truck driver can't survive with 100, anything below 100,000? What's the justification?
The other reason might also be housing this company and someone who is well, the company, the middle man, rather than the
No, but the classification has nothing to do with whether you are a company or you are an individual. As long as you have a 45-ton truck and that truck is traveling within the country, I should look at 167,500 as the minimum wage. But if my truck is 25 tons, then I should pay that person not less than. I mean, the amount that you pay can be higher. You can decide to pay your domestic worker 234,000 or more than that. That has nothing, no problem. But the reason is, why should we set the minimum wage as low as this? Or in other words, do we need to set a minimum wage for a truck driver at all? Or he can negotiate? I mean, he has a driving license. He's skilled. Having a driver's license means that he's a skilled person. Why can't he negotiate for his own wage?
The international and the local one. When you talk about according to the license, they are also different licenses. According to the prices, they also have the different license. But I think the problem is that they have
the national driver's license. Yeah, but the thing is, why should we prescribe a minimum wage? Okay, maybe let's go. I'll come back to this. I'll go to another slide and then I can. Okay, what did I do? So this is how the minister decides on how the minimum wage should be according to the Act, the Employment Act. It says he will consider the needs of workers and their families and the general level of wages, the cost of living, social security, benefits, and relative living standards of other social groups. Economic factors, including the requirements of economic development, levels of productivity, and any effect the wage might have on employment. So if we go to those, we are saying we are using economic factors. If we are using economic factors, a domestic worker is living in the same environment where a truck driver is operating. A domestic worker may have a wife or husband who is not working, children, maybe even more children, maybe 6 children, for example. and he may have dependents like old parents, etc. So the domestic worker has this. If we are looking at the economic factors, then you go to truck driver, maybe he's single, doesn't have children, but so what economic factors are we looking at? If we look at A and B, are we being guided in setting the minimum wage on those? Maybe we haven't reached this far. Let's go back to where we are. The main reason why minimum wages are set, maybe I should not remove this. We don't want loosely connected employees to be exploited. In South Africa currently, I think the minimum wage is rand is at 7,500 rand, which is how much in Malawi? It's almost 95. Almost 100. 95. 95 kwacha to a rand. How much is it in Malawi? Almost 700. Almost 750,000 Malawi. Close to that. 600, most 600, over 600,000.
That's the minimum wage.
Yeah. Yeah, which, of course, when Malawians go there to work, because they don't work formally, and the employers know that if they want Mozambicans, Malawians, that means they don't want to employ people who have a work permit. They pay them as low as, I know they pay them as low as 2,500 rand, which is almost 1/3 of this. Yeah, thereabouts. Which is almost close to what our truck driver is getting. So the initial classification, the initial minimum wage was only designated as either someone who is in the urban setting or rural setting. So they had different wage arrangements. But then they realized that, or they were forced to downgrade a certain group of people. Okay, the understanding is that when you employ a guard, is not operating from the house. The assumption that is made is that this domestic worker is staying in the same house, is eating from the same house. Normally he is housed either in a quarters within or outside, but within a short distance. And because of that, their cost of survival is much less than that of the others. But this may be the same. You can hire a guard who is staying in the quarters, and whenever food is prepared, is included on the food arrangement, but his minimum wage is a little higher. I think one of the rates which has not been included here, I don't know what classification they have used, because currently there is another group that is getting a minimum wage of 750,000. 75,000. So we have those that are getting 52,000 as domestic workers. And then I think the same group that is being classified as urban and rural, there is a certain group, for whatever reasons, they are allowed to be given 75. And then we come to the 90,000, and then the truck drivers. But in our case, as social security, what we are saying is at least there's something to go against abuse of workers or exploitation of workers, that by setting the minimum wage. Yeah. The next question, which I've also tried to answer when I was discussing the distinction of these things. Relates to why set minimum wages. The reasons would be different for domestic workers, truck drivers. Okay. I think the truck drivers, if I can remember properly, they only came to be classified separately from all others because of the national economic reasons. I'll explain. National economic reasons. There was a time when the classification was going to as far as whether the truck you are using is for wet cargo or dry cargo. Wet cargo is basically the fuels, the petroleum products that come into the country. I think there was a time when the truck drivers staged a strike. There were broken roads, etc., because some of the employers of these truck drivers were paying them, if you use that word, peanuts. So they would go to Dar es Salaam, go to Beira, carry fuel, bring to the country, but their wages were peanuts. In fact, there was a time where most truck drivers were not even being paid. They said, here's a truck, I'll be giving you assignments, but how you survive, it's your own business. So the truck driver would either sell part of the fuel that is using in his truck, or he would carry matola and make a lot of money. Of course, even now they do. I mean, truck drivers make more money. But that was not the justification for an employer not to pay the person. I've heard some people say, if I can only be given a truck to be driving, I can't even force my employer to be paying me. I'll take care of myself. I'll survive. And I'll go to the extent of, if it needs fixing, I'll fix it on my own to make sure that it's always on the road. And some of the truck drivers find the jobs, major jobs for themselves, and they run because they know they are making a lot of money on the go. So there was this economic, national economic reason, because when they closed the borders, the truck drivers with their trucks, it meant the country was running out of fuel, for example. One of the things was fuel. Or if the truck drivers carrying fertilizer from Beira or wherever to this country decide to close, that had an effect of having a lot of fertilizer which is required for the economic well-being of this country not to reach this country. So instead of allowing the truck owners to decide on their own how much they are willing to pay a truck driver, the government had to come into the negotiation and set up the minimum wages. The reason is that in this case, it was a national economic reasoning to say, let's not plunge the country into turmoil just because the owners of the trucks are not willing to pay the workers enough money. But in their case, I think there is also another aspect, because most of the major supplies of, let's say, petroleum products, the pricing is negotiated, how much they should charge bringing fuel from per kilometer liter. So the tonnage or the liters that they carry and the distance that they carry, it's already negotiated. They already agree how much the government already sets in setting the price, for example, of fuels. They set how much should be paid to the truck owners for this product. And in that price, they negotiate as well how much they are paying for a truck driver traveling from Dar es Salaam to Malawi in a month. So in one way or another, that money is also negotiated, but it depends on how many trips does he make. If your truck is only being hired, maybe it's going to Dar es Salaam twice in a month. You are being paid, yes, but the question is how much? And the truck driver, whether he has gone to Dar es Salaam or he has not gone, he will still be paid the minimum wage that we have seen, 234,000. But the truck owner may say, but I'm not getting as many contracts as would justify paying this much. Yes, this truck sometimes goes international, sometimes it goes to Debe, sometimes it goes to Lusaka, other times it goes to Tete, other times it goes to Mbeya. But how many times? Why should I pay this much? I think this debate continues. I think I've heard there will be another strike or truck drivers are about to strike. I don't know whether the reasoning is the same on the minimum wage. But I'm saying, now that's me. I'm saying the reason why domestic workers need to have a certain minimum wage is because of their status. They are vulnerable. They want money, whatever little money they can get. So instead of getting a good amount, they can accept any amount that the owner may offer. So what the government is saying is, no, you can pay anything, but it shouldn't be below this much. 52,000, assuming the worker, the domestic worker, is staying at his house. Even if he gets a house which is rated at 20,000 a month, does the remaining 30,000 make it possible for her or for him to cover the month eating? We don't know. But at least this is higher, as we can see, as we saw that the minimum wage used to be 38,000. So I think in February, 1 February this year, that's when the minimum wage went up. If we look at, I've already explained the truck drivers scenario. To say the truck drivers have an issue. But I'm saying, was there any reason for what happened to my laptop? It wasn't charging. Was there any reason to differentiate the other truck drivers driving less than 30 tons and these other workers? Was there any reason? 90 and 100. Is there any difference? Really? Why not all of them make them 100? Why should you differentiate by 10? I mean, some of these justifications are not here or there. Then there is the issue of okay, I was looking at this. So I've explained the truck drivers, but I'm saying even the other casual workers. I still have let me, my laptop might get out of power. I just need to get an extension. Yeah, I was explaining the why, the distinction between a why should government be setting minimum wages, and I explained why domestic workers need such protection. And I was in the process of explaining the, explaining the reasoning for casual workers. And the casual workers that I'm thinking about are those that are working as guards or farm workers. Mostly they don't have the capacity to negotiate for their own wage. And it's government's commitment to make sure that these are not exploited. So that's why it's a social security. But I'm saying there are certain associations, I can give an example of Tea Association of Malawi, which as a grouping of those that are in the tea industry, they set their own minimum wages for the companies under their association. And normally it's above the minimum wage that the government sets. Maybe I should explain as well how does the minister set the minimum wage. How does the minister set the minimum wage? I didn't mention anything about the first statement. The first statement says, in consultation with the representative organizations of workers and employers, reconsider the levels of minimum wages at least once every 3 years. So every 3 years, there is a need for a review, which happened this year in February. And the representative organizations that are consulted most often is there's an organization called ICAMA, Employers Competitive Association of Malawi, and there's also what do you call the Association for Employees. The National Association, of course, the member associations are like TUM, etc. But the main Malawi Congress of Trade Unions, MCTU. So the minister, in consultation with ICAMA, no, it's not ICAMA. ICAMA. Yeah, ICAMA is Economics Association. But in ICAMA, it consults ICAM and MCTU. Normally, they are meetings taking place, and there is counter proposals. For example, ICAM can say, Marathon is 3 years, and say, no, minimum wage for workers, all workers should be 150,000. But the employers can say, oh, we can't afford this. What if it can be 60,000? There may be arguments for and against, and probably after a lot of consultations, they may settle at 75,000. So that's the amount that the minister will announce. And I already explained that the minister may consider the, these other things. And I think what I said about tea association is what is provided here. That if there are agreements already in place between the employers and the employees, the minimum wage should be according to that. So like the tea association may have already an agreement with their employees to say our minimum wage is 120,000. So if the negotiations reach for 75,000, then these will not be affected. They'll still continue to get 120,000 as agreed with the tea association, although the minimum wage has been set at 75,000. You get the process. That is, yeah.
I do get it, but mostly the reason of setting the minimum wage, I think it's because of the kind of job that someone is doing. And maybe the position, because if on the look of things, most of these companies were even the government, so they don't pay someone on how it's performing. They pay someone on the position. Maybe that put someone as a busy and someone as a process. Yeah. So I don't know how did they come up with this.
It's just a way of dealing with some of the issues. I mean, currently, some of us who operate maybe on a different kind of setup. You stop hiring employees because I know I don't need a person 100% to work for me. But I may need once in a week for 2 hours someone to come and wash my clothes. Maybe I may need once in a week to do general cleaning of the house. So if I pay that person, let's say 2,000 or 3,000 for the task, at the end of the month, I only pay 12,000 for washing clothes. And then if it's for general cleaning, I pay another 2,000 per assignment, and it's another 8,000. So at the end of the month, I may only pay 20,000. But at the same time, assuming the person has a number of engagements, he washes the clothes in my house, he washes in another house, he goes to another place, it means that the person can easily earn more. He can earn 4,000 from me in a month, earn a certain amount from another person, 15,000 somewhere, and maybe at the end of the month he can get 70,000 instead of 52,000. I'm just assuming that can work. But is it working? The other challenge that we can deal with, which is I think the next item that I want us to look at, is what safeguards are there for employment. Because if you are setting a minimum wage, you must also safeguard the job that the person has. And I think that's what I want to look at as my last thing. The first thing is the power to terminate employment. Because for whatever reason, an employer can decide to terminate and it's accepted. It only questions the reasons why you are terminating. Initially, it didn't question. I think the employment that initially it didn't question. It was up to the employer or employee to terminate employment as long as the notice has been given. So you only give notice. If it's the notice period is 1 month, you give 1 month's notice. If it's 3 months, you give 3 months notice. If it's 2 weeks, you give 2 weeks notice. Then it will be okay. But I think there is a clause that was added. Now to say, if you are employing, if you are terminating employment based on the capacity or conduct of the employee in terms of the requirements of the job, without giving those reasons. And then you need to explain. In other words, you are bound to explain that, well, this employee, I employed him to be driving my truck. But every other time he goes out to drive my truck, he comes out with an accident. So the number of accidents has grown. Of course, there are other requirements that we need to show that you gave him a warning, you gave him either verbal or written, or if there are other measures that you can take, train the person, or even go now to the extent of termination. That should be proven. Otherwise, it will be taken as if you are unfairly dismissing the person. If it's conduct that he is always drunk, the same measures should be taken. Then it will be acceptable to terminate that employment. Otherwise, there will be measures that the labor office can take against you. So that's the second point. If you have any issues, whether you are still employed or they have terminated your employment, about your rights and liabilities, maybe the employer is saying, because you harm my truck, get involved in an accident, on terminating you, I will deduct you all the amounts related to the damage of the vehicle. You say, but that's not what we agreed in terms of our working conditions. And then the employer is insisting, you may go to the labor office and observe the labor office to assist you resolve the issue. But it can be many other issues that relate to your employment. Maybe it can be the number of hours that you work. There are people that are told to work come here by 6 o'clock and then they are at work until 9 o'clock. But there is no overtime being given. You can go to the labor office to seek guidance or to make the labor office intervene in the rights and obligations that you are given or you are going through or whatever. But it can be the employer or the employee. If the employee is becoming difficult to deal with, of course, we always think that the employer has an upper hand. He can do ABCD, but he knows that if he just decides to terminate the employee, it will be the labor office can intervene against him. So he may even in a situation where he feels the employee is demanding certain things that are not possible within the job. You can get the labor officer to intervene, and the labor office may write a letter instructing them as to how they should deal with the situation. That's what this provision is saying, that the labor office or the labor officer may try to intervene in any situation that can arise between employer and employee. But this is not the end, because for the employee, he may decide to move beyond the labor office. If any of the either the employer or employee is not satisfied with the determination of the labor officer, they may take the matter. Most likely, the employee may take the matter to industrial relations court. I think there is a chairperson based in, I don't know whether it's based in London, but with the vice chairpersons based in the Lilongwe and in Zeus. Yeah. What these courts do is that they go and take care of the issues that may arise between employer and employee when the employee moves in. So it's like a normal court. The employee goes to the labor officer, he gets determination, he's not happy, then he may request a letter be given to him to take to the industrial relations court, and the matter will be now decided by the court. You can understand that the labor officer's role is arbitration. So he brings the employer and the employee together and discuss the matters. And normally, the labor officer will cite what the law says in the situations that have arisen, based on the facts that are presented to him. And when he brings this to the employer and employee as they meet and they don't agree, or the employee feels still there's something that is wrong, then they are allowed to go to Industrial Relations Court. But the Industrial Relations Court does not go into the court system, as it were, in the first place. The first time the Industrial Relations Court meets both of you, what they try to do is also arbitrate. Arbitration. The spelling has gone, but their first intention is to arbitrate. So they will bring the facts that you bring, or the information that both of you bring, and using that information, they try to resolve the issue. If you are not happy, then they say we are going to a court setup where the plaintiff mostly the employee brings the issues versus the defendant. In this case, the employer. And the employer will put up his case why he feels he was justified in doing what he might have done. And in that case, the chairperson or vice chairperson of the Industrial Relations Court will make a determination. But even if in that case you are not satisfied, you may take the issue to the High Court. You may take it further to the High Court, and the High Court's determination is not satisfactory. You may take it to the Supreme Court of Appeal. But most issues end at the legal office. Most employee issues are handled at the legal office. But when you go to the Industrial Relations Court as well, you discover that there is overwhelming number of cases. I think you can easily find a case that is lying there for 3-4 years without a determination because of the number of issues that are arising. More especially at the beginning of when the Employment Act came into effect, because there were many issues that the employer took for granted. It could just decide, for example, termination. It could just decide that I'm going to terminate you, have the powers to remove you without giving an opportunity to the employee to present his case that here is my position. This is what happened to me, and this is why I ended up in this situation. That kind of scenario never existed at the time. Never existed at that time. So it created a lot of issues that were coming up. The employers didn't have most of them the capacity to deal with employees. And the employees were mostly aggrieved on issues that they were already, maybe they committed themselves to, but they felt like they are being penalized, and they felt the only way is to go to industrial relations court. So the industrial relations court became overwhelmed with a lot of cases. The other issue that I wanted to raise is that an employer has an entitlement to take disciplinary action other than dismissal. And as long as it's reasonable to do so. And but when it comes to dismissal, then the issue of number one comes in. There must be reasons which can be justified. And apart from those, I think I talked about the minimum wage, but there's a demand that if you dismiss an employee, you are supposed to pay severance allowance. I think there is a schedule in the Employment Act which specifies how much is severance allowance, depending on the number of years that you worked for the organization and the circumstances that led to either the dismissal or whatever reason. But that's nothing, because in our case, our focus is social security. What is the social security that an employee has? Because it's not only when he is at the end of his employment, when he has reached retirement, but even during the time that he is working in the institution, what kind of protection, what kind of elements keep him alive, keep him protected. I think you will see that later on we are going to look at problems that can arise because of from safety issues, from health and safety issues at a later time. But today, I thought we can focus on the minimum wage as a form of social security for an employee working. Any questions? Right. I think we can stop there. I don't understand this one. Did I upload it on the very first one, which you responded, and I have not acted. But I said I would post it on the minutes. I did. I'm surprised also on the HR audit. I think part of the students online and the sales and those on the weekend, only the one person yourself which responded to the HR audit assignment. The other one, I think the closing day was yesterday. So when I was checking the submissions, I only saw yesterday. And then I'm thinking I already posted the one for I'll check. If I did, then I'll post, and then I'll put another date.
Is the vote already?
Huh?
Is the vote already?
They have, I think they have redone it, and today I managed to get it to the board. But I think because there are certain things leave that were not available to students which we need to make them available to students. I think we looked at our academy to make it that certain things will be available.